Let me just say we got William Spivey today, and oh my gosh, I every time I see your name, whether it's scrolling through the feed or in a submission to Cultured, I just like I'm in. I know I'm in for something really good, and I like the respect. You probably don't know just the level of respect you have. There's so many people I've talked to, my fellow writers, talked to them, I mention your name, and they're just like, "Yep, that guy is awesome." So I just love seeing you. I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad for all the work you do. So I don't know, maybe you want to introduce yourself to our listeners, and then I encourage them to follow you because you teach us everything. You're the teacher.
Well, thank you, Walter. I'm William Spivey. You can find me at williamfspivey.com and the William F. Spivey History channel on Substack. On Medium at William Spivey. So I write a lot about history and politics and race and education sometimes. And uh, I always throw in that I'm a graduate of Fisk University, which I would be nothing without. And that's pretty much it.
Perfect. Well, any thoughts? I'll let you do the pivot to you.
Yeah, no problem. My name's Will Fullwood. For those of you who don't know me, creator of the Contraband Wagon, where I'm changing the conversation on race. My Substack, the Contraband Wagon, is primarily focused on creating conversations on the subject of race and white supremacy. And yeah, that's kind of the work that I'm doing as an anti-racism activist. And just a side note, I'm a paid subscriber of William Spivey because I very much support the work that he's doing in terms of documenting history, particularly parts of history involving the brutality of slavery and the dehumanization involved that I think is very valuable in terms of our, prospects for future generations getting through this toxic environment that we've created here.
Yeah. And I just want to say I was talking earlier this week with Bob Dana and King Ray Vet and you know people who have lived through the civil rights era who have seen things and they just the people that have seen real history, it's so scary what we're living through right now with this effort to just erase stuff. And it almost just feels like, it's like burning all the libraries is kind of what they want to do. They want to erase the history, the true shameful history of this country. And it's so important for people who have had that lived experience to speak out now and to tell people. And this has been ongoing. I mean, we've been seeing it in schools. Our schools, they're teaching. There's places where textbooks they have the lost cause narrative, and what we're living through right now is a consequence, largely, I think, of decent people remaining silent while our systems teach blatant lies, like these sanitized versions of history in pursuit of this absurd greatness narrative of this nation. And I never in my life felt so scared about history, their attempts to erase history. It's not going to be possible because so much of us have seen it. But yeah, William, you're on the front line, and I always learn more things about true history. The positive is we are turning on this light, so more people want to uncover what really happened. And William, you've been leading the way there, so thank you.
Thank you. And I want to say that I would ask everybody to pay attention and ask other people about what's going on or what's going on in their lives. I grew up uh, in the 60s and I was around during the civil rights movement, but I was a kid and a lot of it was going on and I was paying no attention whatsoever. And looking back, when I went to Fisk, I was surrounded by people that were involved in the freedom rides and the civil rights movement. I mean, very active and at risk. And I only knew them like I met Kelly Miller Smith, who was the pastor of First Baptist Church in Nashville, and I was trying to hit on his daughter, and I had no idea that how active he was. And there's other people around. Diane Nash was in Nashville at the time, and she was one of the leaders of the Freedom Rides movements, and also active with the SCLC and Dr. King. And there were people around me that I wished I had asked then to find out what I'm going back and trying to research now. So there are people in your lives right now, whether it be your parents, your grandparents, or friends and neighbors that know stuff that you should know. So I encourage you to ask them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just second that. You never know who's right around the corner sometimes, especially in the United States of America, when we're kind of isolated in our little bubble. So it does take a certain kind of intentionality to go out there and meet people, communicate. And, that's the central nature of the work that I do in creating conversations, right? Because if you don't talk about it, then it dies. So, yeah, I definitely want to encourage people to go out there. It's something that I did, Walter and William, a lot when I lived in New York City. I was teaching mathematics at public schools in New York City and all the boroughs. But, I always kept a kind of service mentality alive in me. And through that service mentality, I did meet a lot of people, including a lot of people who, again, did march with Dr. King or work with Malcolm X. And it was just really enlightening learning what they went through, in their struggle of organization, of mixed ideologies coming together, and just hearing some of that insider knowledge is definitely critical at this time when we need to be organizing and figure out how to collectively move forward.
Yeah. This week too, Will and I guess it was a week ago now, we were having some discussions because I'm finding I'm making this bigger effort because there is so much more interest. Actually, people are just they're curious and they're a little bit they're baffled and they're frustrated and everybody's uncertain. And to some extent, yes, there's a lot more that people are more willing to hear about things that they kind of would have shut off before. But yet you still find it where people are resistant when you're trying to talk about the true history, people don't want to identify white supremacy as the problem that we're facing even now. I mean, among white people, where they're just, you say the words and their faces start to gloss over. But I think, this idea of talking to our grandparents. I mean, we were probably I know I was one of the ones who I let my eyes gloss over, like what William was saying. You lived through an era as a kid and you're kind of, yeah, you're more worried about going on dates than you are necessarily about the historical era, things that are going around you. And so I've talked to elder people in my life and, and they want to talk to you, but then they start talking, they realize you aren't really listening. And we are in this era where people do want to hear these things. And if you approach the people that were there and have seen things, yes, they're willing to talk. And the more important thing is now we are willing to hear too. So those two things are important. Those are the first two things. And then just making that active effort to continue and evolve these discussions, make them regular. That's really important. Your thoughts on that, William, on just getting people to listen, how you've seen that change, and just the importance of the people with the true actual physical knowledge of having been, in these historical eras we're talking about?
Well, and I want to well, I don't want to. I want to disagree a little bit that people are always willing to listen because, and I'm not talking about your relatives and grandparents stuff like that, but I'm talking about people here today.
Yeah.
I got criticized for a piece I wrote about Amity County in Mississippi, where a 10-year-old boy was run over by somebody, and they charged him with the least possible charges, which was being a DUI, where he was high on marijuana, and the driver, obviously a white male, and leaving the scene of an accident. And his excuse for leaving the scene of an accident was that he didn't have a cell signal and he left to go call 911, but he never called 911. And after less than an hour, it went to trial and a jury found him innocent in of both charges when he did have a blood test that said he was high on marijuana and he did leave the scene. So how did they find him innocent? And I look back at the history of Amity County and found they had 14 documented lynchings. And the story behind those, where they knew who did it in a couple of those most egregious cases, and still they were never prosecuted. I talked about the county, and somebody said, "Why are you being so divisive? Why are you bringing up these things?" And and then they threw some Dr. King quotes at me,
Yeah.
and
God.
that's what it gets me is when they take his quotes out of context and never bring up the quotes like a riot is
The
excuse
language,
me, a
yeah.
riot is voice of the unheard, and some of the other quotes where he turns out to be a bit more militant than they want to remember him as. And so People aren't always willing to listen, but I did find that people are willing to jump. I didn't even have a chance to respond before other people jumped in and basically shouted him down
Good.
for
Fair.
having brought that stuff up. And I'd say in some of the forums where I'm at, Medium and Substack in particular, I say that the audience is generally receptive, and most people are positive. Although there are some, and I had some spells where some trolls track me down and want to come back at everything I say, but they never dispute the facts. They just talk about me for having said it.
Mm.
So
Well,
Yeah, so um I do think you're right in terms of the trend, Walter, of people listening more. Um and I think it's because of how bad things are getting and how overt white supremacy is showing up in our lives. The more that that occurs, which I believe we have a long descent to go from where we are right now, unfortunately. And as the worse things get, the more our institutions and systems break down and the more people feel the impacts of that, then I think that, yes, there will be a ready and waiting audience to try to understand what's happening. Because I think right now, in terms of the racial foundation of what's happening, the white supremacist foundation of what's happening, most people I think are largely ignorant of it. Um, and I think that's by design, right? That's part of the system of white supremacy is making sure that people remain in ignorance of race and racial hierarchy, how it operates, so that when things are happening to people, they're losing their health care, it's becoming unaffordable, their grocery prices are going up, like, people are being grabbed off the street and being thrown in prisons. They're opening up institutions to put anyone that they deem unsuitable into them. All of our money is being redirected into violence. Um, you know, um, Without really having an understanding of the system of white supremacy, you can't really ever discover the foundation of all of these acts. And That's the way that
mhm,
seems like our government would like to keep it. And I'm not just talking about Republicans either. Um,
mhm, mhm.
yeah, it's a interesting situation in terms of the dynamics. Yeah, I think people are going to be more willing to listen when they're feeling the pain. That's how it is, unfortunately. Or
Mhm.
when blood is spilled, I used to say.
Yeah.
That's when people's ears become open. I want to change that, just to end on this point. I do want to change that dynamic. I have never liked that. I've always noticed it, blood is spilled and suddenly people want to listen. People want to do something and then it fades and then more blood is spilled. And then we come back and we do it again and again and again. And I really feel like this is no different, even though blood is being spilled overtly as we've seen in past, human rights movements, like, but this is a little bit different. It's going to be a little bit more all encompassing, I believe, for the entirety of the country. I don't think anyone will be able to escape the consequences of this in some dimension. And I think therein lies our power to collaborate and cooperate against hopefully what we see eventually as a common enemy. But first,
Yeah.
we got to get people educated.
Yeah. And I completely agree with both of you. And William, I see what well you're because I get those exact same comments. The word divisive came up. That specific word, they use all the same tactics. Because I was writing my comment about Adam Kinzinger, and I'm just like, is he really helping us? He's doing these things, and I mentioned all the things that he's done that I disagree with, and I'm just like, this is just constructive criticism. I don't think he's helping. And somebody said, even if what you're saying is true, this way you're putting it is kind of divisive. So I'm just like, wait. So I shouldn't. And that really kind of gets to the kernel of what we're dealing with, right? Because it's this argument that a lot of people have normalized. If something is divisive, all of a sudden, just because it's divisive, now we should censor it. And what we're living through this time, we're seeing the consequence of doing that. Sometimes we just have to face the ugly truth of things, so we're empowered then to make these changes. And so I feel that what the moment we're in right now is that people are out there floundering. They're trying to get some sort of footing. Thank you for all the hearts, wonderful people. People are out there floundering. They're trying to get some footing. They're looking for answers. And yet, if you say, well, the problem is that white supremacists are running the country, Then they go, no, it can't be that. And so, and so it's like, we're kind of still, so at least they're coming to you. They're asking questions. They're listening a little bit, but then we still have to make that jump where people actually start. Cause I don't know. I'm sure you guys run into this more than I have, of white people denying the reality of how much of an influence white supremacy has on our country and our culture. And we're just, it's a, I mean, one by one, I know there are some people I'm getting through to, and like Nick Paro's gotten so good at it, where he's just like, oh yeah. And like, once you get past that, whatever it is it a socially conditioned barrier among white people in particular, where they just don't see it? Once you get back to it, you pull that curtain away, and then they're like, oh wait, yeah, everything you said all of a sudden lines up. It all makes perfect sense. Yes, this is the problem. And just this cultural indoctrination and conditioning to make us disregard thing, which all starts with the censorship of history. Um, you know, there's a lot to overcome. But I'll turn it over to you, William, and get your thoughts on that little rant
Well,
I
we
just made.
we currently have an administration based on white supremacy, and they support everything that white supremacy does and deny everything that
Yes.
would go. And an example would be the Martin Luther King Day, that not one person from the Trump administration mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King's name out loud. And in previous years, as president, Trump issued a proclamation, but this year he didn't for some period of time until finally about 7:30 p.m. Somebody released a statement, and then when anybody asked about it, it just referred to the statement without mentioning his name out loud. And they were fully prepared and insisted on not bringing up Martin Luther King's name, and nobody else in the administration had the courage to bring it up, because in past years, everybody would have something to say in honor of the day or the man or the history, but they're simply trying to deny it all. And most people, back to the comments and things like that, most people don't argue the facts with me because they don't know enough about it themselves to be able to combat it with facts. But they'll say, well, it didn't happen, it couldn't happen. And like Trump said, depending on his morality to determine, what he does and doesn't do as opposed to the law. Well, they rely on their feelings. And I talk about Thomas Jefferson a lot, and mostly not never in a positive way. But people refuse to accept that he could have done anything wrong, and he's responsible for the institutional rape of millions of black women. So, I say that people get their panties in a bunch, their whatever, and just go crazy that I said it, but they can't dispute the facts.
Mhm.
Yeah. Isn't that the story of people trying to deal with white supremacy? They go crazy, but they can't dispute the facts. That's
Yeah.
kind of storyline there. Yeah. Um, you know, the foundation of the work that I'm doing, right, is deconditioning. I think that not just racialized white people, Walter, but the vast majority of Americans, um, do not have a real understanding of the foundation of white supremacy because it's not taught anywhere. You can only learn it if, like Mr. Spivey, you go and you do your own independent research, and not everyone's equipped to do that. And in fact, most people are not. And not everyone has the time or energy or the will to do it. In fact, most people do not. And nor do we exist in an environment where it's considered a priority to make sure that our populace is educated in that manner. So under those circumstances, um, it's really not surprising that people don't listen, right? Or that people have a hard time accepting. I mean, that's number one. But then number two is the depth of evil that we are dealing with is something that is extreme beyond what most people can imagine, because most people are not evil. And so the combination of being unable to understand evil really is the best way that I can put it, and not really having an environment to kind of recognize the betrayal that white supremacy enforces upon all of us in this country, by indoctrinating us into that system. As soon as they stamp black, white, Asian, Latino, whatever on our birth certificates,
Mhm.
and bring us into a system of racial hierarchy and human worth and power.
Yeah.
Um, as soon as that happens, we're in it, right? And we know that there's been generations of mythology pushed on
Mhm.
us, whether it's about American history, whether it's about ranking of human beings based on skin color, whether it's about who contributed what, all of these things, or in Mr. Spivey's case, what he focuses on, these named breeding farms, that were created, exploiting human bodies, black women's human bodies to the highest extent, and so, you know, I think that really most people have not grappled with that level of despotism, that was
Yeah.
that perpetuated by our United States government. So what's happening right now where human life is being devalued, right? Where policy decisions are being made that are known to be dangerous and likely going to cause significant human casualties. And yeah, you can see most government officials shrugging their shoulders at it.
Yeah.
That's what we get, right, from our history.
And what even makes me more upset is the indifference of other what would be otherwise good people. Like, I'm just trying to crack that. How do I get through to the? Because, like, you watch things like the tremendous loss, the terrible loss of life in Venezuela, and then, all the different police killings that have been going on for you, and then you're watching these reunions of kids, when the ones that are fortunate enough to get released from ICE. Arturo sent a video about that the other day, and just this kid woes and embraces his dad, but he's just a crushed little toddler, walking up, just like that sadness in him, and it's just, because there's people that are good, and just there's that numbness of all, and it's particularly among the white population. There's this numbness to that, and people will say things like, "You're getting all hysterical, but they're never coming knocking on your door," and it's like, it doesn't matter if they're on my door. Just knowing that that pain is being inflicted on people, um, it just it just it's heartbreaking, and it gets to the point where, I'm starting to be louder and louder at just walking around in public about the things that are going on, and people give you that look, and it's the same. Everybody here in the chat and everybody who goes and reads the comments on Williams' pages, you'll see those aggressive, those hostile people with their "don't be divisive" language. They'll say, "I appreciate your message, but now's not the time to talk about it." Like, and we all know this. Everybody knows this. I mean, for those of us who only see it from online, that's all the mechanism of maintaining white supremacy, that distracting us and pressuring us, because they can default to the cultural norms where the white supremacy has been established. And that's what we have to break through. And I think a lot of it is getting to the points where because we're numb, so much of the country remains numb about all these horrible things that are going on. I mean, and the fact that people will be more inclined to say to you, we can't teach that at school, or that we shouldn't talk about it, than they are to actually do anything to prevent these things. And then they'll say things. The one that gets me is they'll say, well, people have always exploited each other. A lot of countries has problems with white supremacy. Slavery has been a world problem. And it's just all these distractions. So I always come back with the distinction about how the United States of America is unique. I would like to, William, you can answer that, what I've just said, and however you want. But yeah, telling more people, just like all the people are here, these birthing farms, which is so much like the start of the rape culture that is so normalized now in the United States. It endures until there's accountability. Those things endure. Things like slave revolts, things like the civil rights here, how we can learn from that. So I'll turn it over to you, William. Answer however you like.
Yeah, I almost don't know where to start. I'll go to two places.
Good.
One is that the rape farms is that, women all over the world have always had to deal with rape, in the fact that in the fear of rape and the existence of rape, but only in America did it become a business model. And that Thomas Jefferson ended the importation of slaves in 1808, which is the very first day he could have done it under the terms of the Constitution, which said that the importation of slaves had to remain for at least 20 years. And on that 20-year anniversary, he ended it. And people give him credit for trying to gradually end the institution of slavery. But what it was increasing the value of domestic bred slaves, of which there was an excess in states like Virginia and Maryland and uh, Delaware. And that excess was due to over farming tobacco, which was a very labor intensive crop, and to the point where the fields were ruined and they had to transition to other products like wheat that required less people. So they had extra enslaved people. And there was a market for them in further south because cotton was beginning to the invention of the cotton gin, and they needed more slaves along with those for indigo and sugar and other products and stuff like that. So ending the international slave trade was simply a means to cut off competition at a lower price competition. So it immediately raised the value of those slaves in well everywhere, the domestic bred, and so the way that it was accomplished was through forced breeding and rape. And Jefferson wrote to people, including George Washington, saying that you can experience a 4% increase in annual earnings if your slave women have at least one child every 2 years. And he didn't explain in his letters what that meant, but and it didn't go into the way that people bred the slaves with bucks and breeders. But while Jefferson didn't say that in his letters, they had publications like trade magazines that went out to farmers throughout the South telling you how to do these things. And just like the Journal of the American Dental Association and stuff like that, they had publications like that that explained what to do, how to increase your yield in production by that. And the second thing I want to say, totally unrelated, is that we are headed towards the uh, making apartheid the model for America. In that we are, as the demographics change, and in I think 2045, that America is projected to be no longer a white majority country. That people are now addressing what it's going to be like when white people are a minority. And there is a dedicated force of people looking to put that in place. If you look at the number of South Africans or people of South African heritage now having important roles in our government, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and people like that, that are, in effect, uh, helping create policy, they are preparing white people to still be in control when they are a minority. So that's kind of what I want to throw out there.
Mm. Well,
That was a lot there, William. How am I supposed to follow that? What are you doing to me? But no, yeah, no, thank you for sharing all that. One thing I'll add to your first point about the rape farms, is um, some other facts that I think are relevant are that there were banks that their exclusive business was mortgaging black women's wombs.
mm,
That's one fact that I want to put out there. Another fact that I want to put out there is um, that well, okay, I totally lost it. Anyways, it'll come back. I'll wait for the number two. But anyways, I just wanted to say that I learned so much from Mr. Spivey and the articles that he shares and whatnot, the research he does, along with many other historians out there who are writing on this. And I just appreciate it because when I am confronted with the evil of white supremacy in my own life, and in my own anti-racism work, then I'm more able to put it into a context. I'm more able to handle it, myself. I'm not trying to separate myself from anyone when I say that, like, understanding evil is, like, not easy for most people. It's not easy for me either, right? Because, that's not how I roll. It's not who I am. It doesn't align with my values. So in order to gain an understanding, um, it does help to understand the level of brutality that my ancestors face, in the United States of America. And here's the point number two. See, I told you to come back. The state power that was used, right, to perpetuate it, right? The bank is one example, because it couldn't exist without the state, but also, for instance, in Virginia law, they also gave themselves a tax break, right, for for creating these child slaves, their for creating their progeny, which was their property, So in Virginia, slave owners, if they created these slaves via rape, these children via rape, then they would also get a tax break, and they enshrined that into law. So it's just to go and show that, like, what we're seeing now with the erasure of a lot of history of Black people from history, from military service, from contributions to the country. Um, and even, we've had Donald Trump just come out and say, don't believe your eyes and ears, right? Believe me. So what we have right now is this large scale attempt at transparent and open brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to push back against that. Ultimately, there's nothing more important, in my opinion, to push back against than these false narratives that seem to be infiltrating our schools, right? We've got PragerU now as a registered vendor, educational vendor for Florida schools, and who knows what other states? I believe Texas now too, and who knows where else in the future.
Mm-hmm.
They're teaching blatant lies and blatant white supremacist mythology. So um, it hasn't really become like no one is up in arms about it, you know, and that's what's a little worrisome about it, and that's why I say things are going to have to continue to decline because, um, yeah, people still don't necessarily understand the scope of the uh, dishonesty that we're dealing with. These people are willing to reach into anyone's mind and transform it. They're willing to change reality in front of your face, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, they don't have any kind of moral compass by which they operate on. So that's what we're up against. And the only way that we're going to end up being able to make headway is if we acknowledge that reality and then target where this system is weak. In my opinion, the system is weak um, because they can no longer control these narratives as they once could. Why? Because we're all connected through technology, because we have people like you, Walter, and you, William, who are sharing the truth and who are revealing the truth and who are showing that it's not so easy to make sure that people believe a lie anymore. And as long as we continue and build up that power and organize it and effectively institute it as much as we can, as efficiently as we can throughout the country, both online and in person, then that is going to do enough, I believe, to create a critical mass of people who can no longer be brainwashed. And that's all we need. We only need that to happen one time, I believe. So um, now is the best time that we've ever had to make that happen. And I'm so glad to be working with you gentlemen, whether intentionally or not, on that project. So I appreciate it.
Oh, so important. There's so much to say. And thank you, first of all, too, for calling it rape farm. Somebody mentioned it in the comments. And I mean, we're just so pushed to use this sanitized language all the time. So yes, calling it what it is. I kind of and so these were just the every plantation, you were sending out the trade magazines, and that was just every plantation was just doing this as an extra thing, or was it also consolidated in one area? And yeah, that's one thing I wanted to ask. But then also too, like the mechanism that keeps us from talking about this, like the reverence, we call them the founding fathers, which is too, normalizes patriarchal systems, like the all powerful father, so that even if you start talking about facts, people get mad at you. They're trained and indoctrinated to get mad at you, even when you're talking about this real history. But yeah, go ahead, William. I'm curious about that. Some more context so we can tell people what happened.
Yeah, the founding fathers, I spent a lot of time on them, and I do wanna say that there were a couple of founding fathers that I single out for doing better than others if you graded them on a curve. John Jay, who was the first Supreme Court justice, uh, put in policies that led to, ending, slavery in New York. He enslaved people himself, but, freed them regularly, and although he did feel that they had to earn their freedom through acts, uh, Thomas Paine, I give him a lot of credit for his philosophy at a time when there were a lot of people wanting to do otherwise. And then I look at the others. Patrick Henry couldn't believe that he was participating in the enslavement of people, and basically said he did it because he was lazy and it was convenient. And I'll skip over Thomas Jefferson because I won't stop talking. George Washington gets a lot of praise for what he did, but he had a slave, Una Judge, that his wife's slave actually had escaped, and he went to great lengths to try to get her back until it became publicly known, and it didn't look good. It wasn't a good look to be pursuing this enslaved person that had gotten away from him. And I will say about Jefferson that he never, of the 600 people he owned in his lifetime, he freed 4 of them, and 2 of them bought their freedom, and he never did free Sally Hemings. The promises he made to free his children with Sally when they reached age, he didn't keep for any of them, although he died before one of them turned 21. So that one beat to death. But they were just, in general, they did not see Black people as people deserving of the rights and respect that other people got. So all the things they wrote about, the beautiful things that Jefferson wrote in the Declaration of Independence did not apply to Black people. And, we had no rights that they were bound to respect, as a Supreme Court justice said at one point in time. So that's it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Supreme Court, William, because that's exactly what I was thinking about while you were talking. For those who don't know, I'm a trained lawyer myself, and you read some of these cases from back in the day and the legal justifications that are being created to decide what's just or not. And you'll find exactly what William mentioned, arguments about the fact that there's no way that Black people could have been considered included in We the People. You read about how, you know, they use God to say that, oh well, God obviously made Black people inferior to white people, and therefore who are we to go against God? Like, I mean, you'll actually read stuff like this, and it doesn't surprise you once you learn the history that we're in a place now where people are being dehumanized, where our government is reaching down into the annals of history and pulling out antiquated laws to try to imprison people and take away people's human rights. It does make a lot more sense the more that you actually read and investigate. In fact, I was talking to one of my friends, a racialized white man who I've known, for decades now, and he was talking about a conversation he was having with his mom about race. And, his mom was kind of pushing back and saying, well, I had a hard life too, and not really allowing herself to listen to what he was trying to communicate with her about race. And I recommended that they read the Dred Scott case together, because there are so many lines in that case that just really are explicit statements of white supremacist ideology and belief of Black inferiority and white superiority. And reading it just in black and white like that from the highest court in the land from not very long ago, y'all.
Mm-hmm.
It really puts things into context for people that, what, this race thing, this white supremacy thing, it is a little bit more intrusive and all encompassing than I maybe once have thought. And that's just opening the door. Once you open that door, the hole you fall into, it's
Yeah. Yeah. And the article I published today about how the Republicans, they spend all their time, 24 hours a day, every minute of every day, promoting their white supremacy narrative at the expense of what your own senses tell you. And you've talked about this a lot, Will, where these people that are beholden to that white supremacy narrative, they just deny the facts before them that prove them wrong. And a recent example is the shooting of Renee Nicole Good, where they released the body cam footage thinking that it somehow exonerated them, when any rational person who watched that footage could see, oh, well, that's blatant murder, because, he murdered her and the car didn't stop. So clearly he did nothing to change things. But they are so contorted. And I need everybody to understand this white supremacy movement. They are so contorted in their worldview. They do not perceive reality. They don't perceive it. They've been indoctrinated not to. And that's the whole Republican indoctrination. And I get so frustrated with the Democrats when their whole strategy relies on the general public recognizing everything the Republicans doing is wrong, disregarding that every day the Republicans indoctrinate their base to disregard reality. And this to me is the essential part of our movement. William's laughing. He knows what I mean. But this to me is the essential part of our movement. We have to combat this. We have to stop. Everybody who comes at you with we have to understand their point of view is just completely full of shit, because they're just, they look at a horse and they see an octopus, and it's like, I don't care, but that's not a viewpoint. That's just wrong. That's just crazy what they're doing. And so and it's all these things like this mechanism that keeps white supremacy alive. It's all based on this camouflage because if you say all by itself, you should understand somebody else's point of view. You're like, well, that sounds reasonable. But the first time I heard it was I was getting the shit kicked out of me by a bully, and you come home and somebody's like, well, obviously, you must have done something to provoke it. What's his point of view? It's like, maybe the bully just beat the shit out of me for no reason. Maybe that's and we can't just disregard that. And in other countries, they don't think like we do here in the United States. Other countries often, that's why we have thoughts like the ugly American. You go abroad and people are like, Americans, some of the things you think, the assumptions you make about humanity, you don't even know you're making them. And it's all part of this white supremacy conditioning. So I don't know, William, anything you can offer to help me untangle that knot and just any insight there, I'd love to hear it.
I want to go back to the Supreme Court, who is the arbiter of what is fair and just in America, and talk about voter suppression in particular. Look at Supreme Court was originated to protect the interest of rich white people, rich white men.
Yeah.
And they haven't strayed too far from that. And you look at gerrymandering, which they've decided that it's fair to have partisan gerrymandering, but not racial gerrymandering. And despite the fact that you can prove a racial impact or result, that means nothing anymore unless you can determine the intent was to do that, which obviously was, because sometimes they say so. And, I want to know what made partisan gerrymandering okay, if the intent is to empower, to change the impact of voting away from a democratic result to a party-based result, which in most cases turns out to be a race-based result. And the Supreme Court it's there to find ways to justify which common sense would tell you is wrong. And you look at the immunity, the absolute immunity given Trump, which J.D. Vance wants to extend to ICE and Border Patrol and everybody else. And some of that was already existed in history in the Riot Act. I recently read up on that. And the Massachusetts Riot Act gave complete absolute immunity to sheriffs and anybody else that, did whatever they had to do to control riots, which again, in those cases were labor-based and protecting the interest of rich white people, men. So this white supremacy is so institutionalized that people think that, in the case of Trump, that, assuming we live through the next 3 years, that he'll be replaced by somebody that can undo it all. But the processes are in place to make it very hard to undo it. And anything that you attempt to undo, no matter how reasonable, is going to be met by, 24/7 Fox News telling you what they're doing to hurt and white men. And it's like that. So it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a snap of the finger and say, okay, everything's back to normal. Normal was never good, but getting back there is going to be harder than people believe.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. In fact, I would go even further. I would say it's not only harder than people would believe, but I don't think it's in our future. I think that's going to happen. Um,
I'm
so
trying to have hope.
listen, man, and see that is so funny you say that, William, because I this conversation keeps coming up about hope, and I want people to understand something. I'm not hopeless about the future, despite what I just said. I'm
Mhm,
absolutely not hopeless about the future, despite what I just said. I don't think that I don't believe in American superiority. I don't believe in American exceptionalism. Okay. I don't think that the institutions that we have are infallible. I don't think anyone should believe that at this point. And I also think that we are capable of creating different institutions that still follow the rule of law, that still respect human dignity, or that maybe for the first time respect human dignity, right? I believe that that's possible. Do I think that that is something that's going to come to fruition within my lifetime? Very likely not. Okay, uh, but I think that that is where hope lies, and for me, that's actually enough. Because why? Because I have people in the next generation after me and the generation after them who I love and who I want to create a world that they can step into and feel empowered and feel like they can be free of the systems of oppression that I grew up under and that you grew up under,
mhm.
you guys. And so yeah, for me, there's no other choice but to push back against the mythology. And I still want to encourage people to consider my methodology, because from my perspective, it has a 100% probability of working if enough people collaborate on it. If we create a critical mass of people for which the white supremacist mythology and brainwashing does not
Mhm.
hit, that is all it takes.
Yes.
And we need to create a collaborative, intentional, aggressive uh,
Yes.
action to do that.
Yeah, I wanna tie into your thoughts on hope because I was a lot more hopeless before I started talking with you and focusing on what the real problem is, and even though it's a huge problem, it's bigger than I thought it was. Being able to identify the problem, at least it gives me, action that I know is productive. The way I look at it, I mean, white supremacy is doomed. It's going to die because it's fatal to the carrier. So all that's left to be seen, the human race is going to survive this. What remains to be seen is whether the United States of America will survive this. And it's like if we have leaders that are completely incompetent and don't perceive reality, the whole world is going to surpass us. And it's like I'm making preparations with my kids to go elsewhere. I know Will's making preparations to go elsewhere. So we're gonna survive this and continue to fight white supremacy. I want to alleviate as much suffering as possible. But I always want to get back to the fact I think they target white supremacists target children because fully formed adults who have been raised with empathy and kindness and love, they will not they become immune. I think they become immunized to the white supremacy toxic mind virus. So that's why they target kids. And that's why history is so important. And William, you're so important in this battle. Because if we just spread the true history of the United States, gets people to read, all these things. When I started reading W.E.B. Du Bois, and it just everything fell into place. You're just like, this makes sense because and even as a kid, when you're 15, you're listening to bullshit, and if you're in a place where you've been indoctrinated and you're listening to bullshit, it's bullshit. Kids know that is bullshit. And that's why, whenever I was a teacher and I tried to teach the kids the truth, I would get pressure from the administration, but never any negative response from the kids who would go from being unruly because they're being propagandized to listening to you intently. Instantly they know. And so that's what gives me hope. I think if we really fight back these lies that are being taught to our kids, the fake history, the sanitized history that overlooks all the true crimes of the United States, for every kid that we tell the truth to, that brings us closer to Will's proposal, where you only need that like 3 or 4% of the population, then it becomes exponential growth. And so all the people listening, I mean, it's a big, big problem, and never underestimate that. But it does give us hope because look at all the people here. You're all empowered to do that now. Make that effort. if you're the grandparent that gets to talk to the kid and the parents aren't around, tell them about the truth about the history of white supremacy in the United States, and then say that, don't go tell your parents about this if you know they don't want them to hear that. But we just have to just spread these things. And like, yes, people don't know about the rape farms. They have to know those things. And just the atrocities, like in the Cornerstone speech, you read that and you're like, this is just pure evil in the form of words. So when people start knowing that and seeing the things, they will reject it. And then that's, I think, the pathway to entering that new age where people actually care when, people get shot in the face by Gestapo or the police or whatever. So your thoughts, William?
I guess I'm one of those grandparents that gets to talk to the grandkids. And,
Yeah.
I see both hope and concern in that, when I was growing up, it was a while before I had to really be concerned about what was going on in the world and how it affected me. And maybe I was in mid-teens when it really got to be a serious thing. But I had a granddaughter who was 11 at the time, and she had a friend at school that was Haitian. And this was back when they were trying to rid Springfield, Ohio, of all the Haitians and make them go home. And she had a friend that was concerned that they were going to come get her father, and she was looking for me to tell her some kind words or something that's going to make all that go away. And I couldn't make it go away. And you look at the kids in Minneapolis right now. If you're brown, and even if you are American citizens and your parents are American citizens, they're subject to be stopped and picked up and even taken away for at least a brief period of time because of the color of their skins, and they are subject to it. So I never had, maybe I should have been concerned about some things, but I wasn't because it wasn't that big a deal in my life. But their everyday life is about facing danger and fear at an age way too young for that to have to be. They didn't get a honeymoon period. They just got thrown into it from birth.
Yeah.
And so that's an issue. But I also see hope in that, they ask me, how does this happen? And what happened here? Or what happened in history? And I don't bombard them with it. You might think I just lecture them all the time about history. But when they ask questions, I'm able to give them answers that still I try to leave them hope at the end of it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, no, I mean that's what we need, right? That's so important. It's hope lies with us, right? It lies in our ability to communicate the truth. And that's why I'm so grateful for this Substack community with people like William, like Walter, with people like Larry, people like Allison, with people like Beth, with people like Cran and so many and Nick and so many other people, people who are dedicated to creating a world based on truth and justice, values that I also ascribe to. So but yeah, we've got a long road ahead of us, and we definitely need to focus on educating the next generation, the same way in which as things get worse in our environment, more and more people will be open to learning about white supremacy. In that same way, these children's future is directly tied to whether we're able to combat these forces or not.
yeah.
These kids are able to understand that. And so we need to embrace the curiosity of children, right? Like they want to know, just like you were expressing, Walter, and we need to create opportunities for them to be educated. And right now, those opportunities are slim and few and far between. But one thing that you can do to help make it less is to actually follow William Spivey. Um, he's got a whole education that you can get on American history that you otherwise are not going to get. Period. Probably from
Mhm.
almost anywhere. So by promoting people like Mr. Spivey and other people who are dedicating their lives to teaching, the true history, which is a history of oppression and suppression, dehumanization, and the fight against that. And that fight includes people racialized in all different ways. Okay, includes racialized white people, racialized black people, Native Americans,
Mhm.
and everybody else. Okay, there have been freedom fighters and people fighting for human rights throughout this entire time.
Yeah.
Um, And so we're just the next generation of that. And you guys should be proud of that. Okay. Embrace it. All right. Don't be afraid of it. Let it empower you and let it guide your actions. And let's together build a future that we could be proud of and that we can be proud to allow our grandsons and granddaughters to walk into.
Perfectly stated. And I just want to follow up with what William said too, because I've been writing these fairy books for my kids, and I hide it. I tell all those histories, but it's in the form of these fairy books. And I had one episode where there was this princess riding along the countryside on a unicorn, and she came across the 9 patriarchal asshats, I called them. And my eldest daughter finally figured it out. She goes, "Daddy, that's the Supreme Court. I know what you're doing." But I'm like, I'll publish these at so she's too smart for me now, but it's like I'll publish these books at some point. Just read these books to people. But Angie in the comments said something really, really important. She said, "Please be engaged and participate in your local school board meetings." And this has come up in my community too. The other day, one of the teachers handed out a card to the kids saying to know your rights. And, it got home to a MAGA parent who called in. And this is the problem with us on the left. We don't call in and just support our teachers. So everybody, when you're done here today, just send them email to your school or the school, even if you don't have kids there, and thank them for teaching the truth. Because the right wing ideology is for us to be silent and just to endure abuse constantly, but they claim for themselves the right to constantly complain. So they're the first to show up at school boards, to run for school board, to have books censored, to insist on what's taught. And I think that is the essence of this fight. We have to rouse ourselves and match and exceed that energy and insist the truth about American history is taught to our kids. Because if you're not doing that, you are through being passive, you are allowing them to indoctrinate your kids with the toxic white supremacy hate virus, which will ultimately destroy them and will destroy other relationships, and it will destroy whatever nation they live in. We're seeing this with American expats going abroad and bringing their right-wing bullshit with them abroad because they've never taken the time to deprogram themselves. So that's what we have to do. And it is hopeful, though, because there's so many people that are sitting there passive and they're so desperate to want to know what to do. And that's what I was talking about before, where so many white people, when you say the problem is white supremacy, and they're just like, are you sure? So we have to overcome that gap, get more white people activated, insist on teaching the real history, and turn to William. If you have any questions about it, educate yourself. You're going to be, your mind's going to be blown if you start reading William's work. We're close, but that's the hopeful thing, people. It just be engaged with your own kids, teach them these truths, and the more that we preserve ourselves, we take it upon ourselves to preserve. You'll preserve the lives of your kids first of all. Whether the nation survives at that point is sort of like, but it does also help the possibility of the nation surviving. But white supremacy kills everything it touches, just like the current president. We're down to 3 minutes, though. I'll turn over to the two of you. Thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful conversation and all the wonderful people talking. William, go ahead and sell yourself. I love you, man. You are my hero. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. And I just want to say to everybody that it's never too late to pick up history and start learning about it. I've learned more in the last 10 years than in the 50 some before that. And you really don't get a feel for history until you have enough of it to get perspective. And let's start learning how things tie to each other. So I encourage you to dig into your history. Start with your family history, but it's never too late.
Yes, and don't forget, guys, learning is a continuous process that continues throughout the course of our lives, whether we're intentional about it or not. So I encourage you all to be intentional in the context of race and white supremacy. Please consider subscribing to William Spivey's Substack because there's so much great learning to be done there. And also, when you speak to your school boards, talk to them about getting Mr. Spivey's content as part of the curriculum. Okay, you guys can take those kinds of actions if you want to promote good education about the subject of race, which is something we desperately need. And finally, I just want to encourage you all to start your investigation into your own self, okay, your own self reflections. Think about your personal connection to white supremacy and its mechanisms and how you can work within your own social circle to bring education to bear on the subject. Okay. You guys have more power and influence than you believe. So don't forget that. And don't forget, my name is Will Fullwood, creator of the Contraband Wagon. If you guys want to be part of my conversations on race, feel free to subscribe to me for free, and you'll get to see them live here.
Yep. And it's so important. I've learned more in the last year than I've probably learned twice as much in the last year and as in my whole rest of my life. And I feel so much better, just because once you actually tear away that stuff, and when we talk about white supremacy, it's indoctrinated into us against our will. It's put into us. Authoritarians, when we don't have power, they abuse us, and we've all been living through this abuse. Our whole country is abusing us now. But we're all together. We don't have to take it anymore, and we can help to protect our kids from having that, having the same thing happen to them. And it's the only way for them to have all the things that you want for your kids. And we're all the same in that. We want our kids to have prosperity and happiness. But yeah, please, anybody who can afford, we're at My Content is Free. Subscribe. Love to have you as subscribers. Make sure if you can become a paid subscriber, support everybody here. It's wonderful. I guess that's it for today. Any last kind of thoughts, or are we ready to go?
Yeah, ready to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for the conversation. Great to see you again, Mr. Spivey and Walter. It's always a pleasure, man. Thanks for
Thank
the
you.
Okay. And thank you, Will. It's good to see you again. And Walter, enjoy this conversation.
Great. Thank you. This was a big one. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
So long.